Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me have your attention, please. All quiet, please. Thank you. Go ahead, open up to your notes. We're going to be continuing looking at, actually wrapping up with the section on continued struggles. We'll talk about the 7 Years' War, the so-called First World War. It's not World War I. That happened 100 years ago. This is a war that takes place in the mid to late part of the 1700s. And then we're going to be getting into the scientific revolution. I don't have anything to give you except go ahead, write it on your calendars. I've got a quiz for you coming up. 20 points on chapter 16. I will give you a study guide. In fact, probably before you guys even come in here the next time, if you want to get started on it, I'll post it on Google Classroom because I'm going to post it there anyway. There's the date. You guys are going to have it on Wednesday, the 6th of January, and I think you'll appreciate this because as I look through our notes and kind of where we are and where we're headed on, page 3, when we get to Western Europe moves out into the world, chapter 16, Mongols and so forth, fall, the Ottoman Turks rise, the page 3 on the handout that I've given you. That actually is chapter 16, and usually students appreciate actually having some notes on some of the material before you actually get quizzed, because the quiz is entirely on the reading, but it is kind of nice when there is a little bit of an overlap, because that does kind of help on that. I've got lots of quizzes and so forth for you guys. In fact, this has been it's been an interesting challenge. All the 4 courses I teach, I've been noticing it's like, wow, we're already to this point. And time is a bit of a crunch as far as like being able to do all the things I would traditionally do in the course of a year for 9th grade history, 10th grade government, 11th, 12th grade IB. But let me tell you this. You are going to have a big test on this unit. I know you guys have been dutifully taking notes, and the payoff is going to be, the test is going to be on those notes. And the test is like 65 points, so that'll be your biggest individual component of the grade. So you'll want to definitely make sure you're going to be ready to go on that. That test will be at the end of the semester. When is the end of the semester? Is it next week? How far after Christmas break? About 3 weeks, yeah. So we have 2 weeks, and then that third week, it's like a 4-day week. It's the Martin Luther King Jr. birthday week, so you get the Monday off. And then there'll be some exams over the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and that's when my exam will be for you guys, in all likelihood. Double check. Do anybody of you guys know if you have any exams before Christmas? Do you? Which classes? Science? Math and bio. Which ones do you know you have after the break? And some of you guys, I have no idea. I just come to school, and if they put a piece of paper in front of me called a test, I guess I do it. No, this is high school now. So I mean, these unlike 8th grade grades that don't go into any transcript of any value, 9th grade grades do. By the time you end up graduating as a senior and so forth, they actually do something that's called ranking you. You ever heard of that? They rank you. They take the total number of you, and then they take your GPA, and then they plug you in based on like what your GPA is. So if you work real hard, and you guys have impressed me so far as a hard-working group, you want to be in a good place as you get to the end of like this semester, doing well on the grades. And for me, it's going to be that big test. Okay, so you guys ready? All right, let's get to it. Well, last we left off, we saw that Britain and France. We were talking about Britain and France, and we were talking about absolute monarchy. Okay. Which of them had absolute monarchy, Britain or France? Yep, France, yeah. Which of them had constitutional monarchy? Britain and France. She said correctly that France had absolute monarchy. Britain has Constitutional monarchy or absolute monarchy? What kind of governmental system does Britain have? Absolute monarchy or constitutional monarchy? This is a recap of what we did last time. Very good. What is constitutional monarchy? You want choices? Okay, how are we going to get choices? In a constitutional monarchy, does the king or monarch, could be a queen, have absolute control power over the government? Or sharing with others, for example, nobles? And your answer is? The second one. Okay, yes. Is that what you guys got in your notes? Okay, so which one does Britain have? Okay, now, I think we left off on this pretty well. What was the problem? In fact, let me just back this up. What was the problem? Raise your hand if you can tell me this. What was the problem that the nobles in Parliament had with King James II? He was the one who had two wives, not at the same time. His first wife had died, and he got remarried to a younger wife. And his first wife, they had had two daughters, Mary and Anne. And then his second wife, she was pregnant. Yes? What was the problem that they had with him? She was Catholic and it was a boy. Good grief. Somebody's Catholic and they have a boy. What's the problem with that? The boy is going to inherit the throne. Is that necessarily a problem if he's got a Catholic mama? Potentially. And that was the key thing. Make sure you have in your notes the Parliament in the Glorious Revolution of 1688, 1689. That was where they were like, you know what? We're in charge, okay? We're in charge. We like it when our monarchs get along with us. If they don't get along with us, like Oliver Cromwell, what did he do to Charles I when Charles I tried to arrest Parliament? Off with his head. So they're like, we're not even going to take any chances. We're going to get rid of James II and his wife and their little baby boy, James, because they didn't want to take a chance. I mean, is there anything about the Catholic faith that necessarily is a problem? Raise your hand if you can tell me. What is their problem with the Catholic faith? Yeah? Oh, they're afraid it's going to be like Bloody Mary. I mean, that Bloody Mary really ruined it as far as like monarchs in England wanting to ever kind of like bring the Catholic faith back in. Do you have in your notes, as part of the Glorious Revolution, Parliament passed a law saying from here on out, no king or queen could be of what faith? You have that in your notes? What was the faith? Catholic faith. Yeah, the Catholic faith. Okay? So, who's William and Mary? Who's William and Mary? Very good. Yeah, the eldest daughter. And who's William? Her husband, yeah. He was from the Netherlands. So like ostensibly kind of a Protestant-y kind of country. They're sort of tolerant and so forth. And so they come over and they are the king and queen together. It's the only time like in British history where they are like co-equal rulers. So like the current queen today, Queen Elizabeth II, she's got a husband. He doesn't even have the title queen. Excuse me, king. Whoops. And he's not a co-ruler or anything. I mean, he's her husband, and they have kids. But, you know, that's what it is. You've got the monarch. But this is the weird time. They're both the monarch. And I can't remember who died first, but how many kids did they have? Do you have that in your notes? 0, exactly. And so then it went to who? The sister, Anne. How many kids did she have that grew up into like adulthood? 0, yeah. And so then did they go with the younger brother, James? Did they go, okay, finally, whatever, James, you can come back you can be on the throne? No. They went with the German cousin, George, who really, I don't think he spoke much English at all when he came over. He was kind of from like the German, I mean, his lineage goes back to, I think it was like when we had James I, he had a daughter, And so that person married into, like, you got all these different marriages into royal families and how that works. And so when they're looking for, like, they all end up being sort of like related to each other. But they brought George the First over. Put this down. The very last English monarch who told Parliament, I'm not going to sign that bill. That's not going to become law. It was Anne. I don't even know what the issue was, but that was like in 1707. That's the last time an English monarch has ever refused to sign a bill into law. Every other law passed by Parliament after that point, the monarch signed it. I tell you what, in Britain today, if Queen Elizabeth, I don't know, she's very popular with the population, but if for some reason the English monarchy became unpopular, and the government's like, okay, we're just going to banish the monarchy, they would pass a bill. And in order for it to go into effect, they would put it right in front of the monarch and go, okay, sign this bill. There goes your house, there goes your title, there goes all these things. And what would they do? Would they sign it? Do you think, yes, they would. Yeah. It's like today the English monarchy really only exists because the population, they like them. And so they do their job. I mean, that's a very important thing. But they don't have real political power like, say, our presidents do. Not the English monarchs. Okay? So, William and Mary, there we go. They established the school there in Virginia, and voila. All right, now, I want to turn our attention next to the last major war of this time period. In fact, it actually goes a little bit beyond the time period we have here. We have 1750, but I want to kind of wrap this up. It's called the 7 Years' War. You ready? Here are the notes of the 7 Years' War. It's going to involve Britain. It's going to involve France. Okay? And this is a good opportunity to look and see what has happened in Europe from the time that we first checked in on them, with the Renaissance, and then through all the Protestant Reformation and all the 30 Years' War and all the chaos and so forth that's going on there. In the 7 Years' War, here's what we need to know. Now, we're actually jumping ahead of ourselves a little bit here, because when I look at this map that I'm showing you here, what parts of the world have we really not hardly talked about at all? The Americas? Yeah. I mean, write this down. The 7 Years' War, besides the fact that it takes 7 years, which is nice that we can keep track of that. What do we got the dates there? 1756 to 1763. It actually takes place mostly in Europe. So it's taking place mostly in Europe. But it also takes place in other parts of the world. That's why historians sometimes say, well, it's the first war that we have that's like a world war. Because you can see on here, this is pretty helpful, they've got these diagonal lines here to indicate that there's going to be fighting over in India. And there's also going to be fighting over in North America. Some of the countries that are fighting each other in Europe are also going to be fighting each other in other parts of the world. In fact, next semester when we get to the part that's in North America, we're not going to necessarily call it the 7 Years' War. Anybody know? I'm kind of curious. What is that war that took place in North America before the American Revolutionary War? If you don't know, it's okay. We're going to be learning more about it. It's got a different name than the 7 Years' War, but it's the same war. It's the French and Indian War. Have you guys heard of the French and Indian War? Okay. Where you have the French and the Indians on one side against the British and their colonists on the other side. That's going to be a big, big thing going on there. Anybody know who won? French and the Indians versus the British and their colonists? How many of you guys think the French and the Indians won? How many think the British and the colonists won? Yeah, that would be it. Very good. Okay? And among the colonists, you're going to have George Washington as a commander of Virginia militia fighting alongside the British against the French and the Indians. Well, that's going to be one of the conflicts going on there. Okay? Put this down about the 7 Years' War. One thing we can notice about this is we're kind of moving past religion as a source of conflict. So it's not going to be Catholics versus Protestants. This is like big countries versus other big countries. For control of territory in Europe. For control of territory in other parts of the world. Big countries versus big countries. All right? In fact, let's go ahead and line it up. Let's line up the first biggest, baddest country in Europe. It's got a big, huge army, and it's got a lot of territory. And it's got an absolute monarch. Raise your hand if you can tell me, what is this European country with an absolute monarch and a lot of territory? No guesses so far? Yes? France. Put it down, France. Okay? This is actually going to take place, I want to say, during the time of Louis XVI. It's after Louis XIV. So France is on the one side. And France, let's write this down. France, not only do they want more territory in Europe, they have also tried to set up colonies and gain control in two areas. One, North America. Write it down. North America. In fact, specifically, Canada. Have you guys ever been to Canada where they speak a lot of French? Have you? Whereabouts?
Where?
Yeah, where in Canada do they speak more French? Western? Eastern. Eastern part, yeah. If you go up to like Vancouver, British Columbia, and so forth, it's mostly English speaking. But if you go over to Quebec and Montreal, have you been to Montreal? Well, you know where you can, but you know where it is. It's basically kind of like right over here, if you can take a look and see where I'm pointing. There was a lot of French settlers, and they're loyal to the French government, and France wanted a big chunk of North America. Who was going to be a rival to them? Who was going to say, I don't think so, France. I don't think you can take over North America because we're going to take it over. Who do you suppose is going to be the big rival of France in North America? Starts with a B, rhymes with itten. Britain, is that right? Yeah, Britain. So Britain and France in North America are going to be at odds with each other. Also put this down. Maybe there's also going to be a rivalry in India. Okay? In India, which has been around for a long time, and we got, the Taj Mahal in India and so forth. We're going to have the French showing up going, hey, we can take control of this. We can take over India. And guess who's also going to be showing up at about the same time saying, hey, no, we can take control over this? Britain. So, put this down. In the 7 Years' War, Britain versus France. Britain versus France. In Europe, and in India, and in North America. This is a good reason why they call it kind of the First World War. Okay? If you're going to win a war, you need a good military. All right? I need somebody to be volunteering as France. France. I need a volunteer to be France. You're France. Wonderful. All right. France. You're going to be going up against Britain. Who's Britain? We need a volunteer to be Britain. Well, we got Britain right here. All right, we'll give the first pick. You need a strong military. I'll let you pick the strong military component. What military component are you going to pick that's going to be stronger than theirs? Army or Navy? Oh, he picks the Navy. Why'd you pick the Navy? It's not a bad pick. Why is that going to help you in a fight against Britain in 3 different locations in the world? Faster than walking? Are you okay with having the best army? Actually, don't write that down. Are you okay with having a good army? Okay, so if you had the best army, what is that going to help you with mostly? The fighting in Europe, close to home, or the fighting overseas? Fighting in Europe. As it turns out, write this down. It's interesting you chose Navy. Write this down. France had a very powerful army. France had a very powerful army. Britain had a very powerful navy. I mean, it's not like France didn't have a good navy, but Britain's was better. And it actually makes sense, because if you're going to be Britain, I mean, you're like, it's right there. I mean, oh, wait. Britain is actually completely surrounded by water. If you want to defend Britain against invasions from other countries, you need to have a good navy. I think that was a good choice. Yeah, if you would let him pick, would you have picked Navy? If you were like picking first Army versus Navy? You're like, I'll take both of them, thank you very much. I'll have strength on both. If you got a strong navy, though, write this down. Britain has a strong navy, and that is going to help them not only to protect their own shoreline against invasion from coming across the sea. If you got a navy, you're going to be able to prevent other people loading up on boats. Remember the Spanish Armada? How successful was Spain in invading Britain? Not very good. I mean, that was a tough go. Almost blew it. That navy is going to be very important. Just to give you a sense of how important is the British Navy, here's a year, 1066. 1066 was the very last time that another group was able to successfully invade Britain. 1066. Britain knows the value of a good navy. Think about this. If you are going to be fighting, and in fact, in North America and in India, it's going to be pretty much Britain versus France, and they're going to have some other people helping them out here and there. The French will have the Indians. The British will have lots of colonists helping them out. Who's going to benefit more? Let's just say you're Britain, and we'll change it around. You got the better navy. France has got the better army. France is doing pretty well in the fighting in Europe. How's that navy going to help you with the overseas fights? You're going to be traveling faster. You're going to be able to travel. What are you going to have on your ships when you are going over to North America, when you're going over to India? What are you going to put on your ships that are going to go over there? You got some suggestions? Let's hear some suggestions. People. What kind of people? Your soldiers. So you're going to put soldiers on the ship? So the ships are going to be transporting? That's cool. You want to have soldiers on your ships? Is that going to help you in the fight in India and in North America? Big time it's going to. Is the French going to have ships with soldiers on them? Not as much. Put this down. Britain beats France in North America and in India, in part because of the strength of the British Navy. If you control the water with your ships, your Navy, you have a big say-so on what is going to go on that Navy and on that water and across the water and over to here. So you have, let's think of it this way. So if you got British troops in North America fighting against the French, are they getting resupplied? Are they getting fresh troops? Yeah, because that's what the British Navy is doing. Is the French Navy able to be doing that as much? No, it's not. It's bad. Yeah. In fact, when Britain beats France, there's a whole bunch of French speakers in a place called Acadia, and they end up getting kicked out of Canada, and they get sent to a French city. It's not known as Orléans, because that's the French name of the city, the original city in France. It's called New Orleans. Have you heard of New Orleans or New Orleans? Right? Do they have a football team or something? What are they called? The Saints, exactly. Have any of you heard of New Orleans? Yeah? Do they speak everything the same as ever the people in this country? There's actually a dialect down there. There's a group of people, the dialect and a culture and so forth. It's called Cajun, which is actually a twist on Acadian. They were refugees from Canada after the 7 Years' War. Okay? So we've spelled that out pretty well. 7 Years' War, Britain with a navy wins in North America. Britain with a navy wins in India. But what about in Europe? Because France has got the army. Okay? Is Britain's navy going to help them in the fight? No, Britain's going to need a friend. All right, let's identify this. It's a German-speaking country. Okay? It's not big Germany yet, but it's in northern German areas. This is the beginning of the coalescence of German speakers around one country in the north, and eventually it will become Germany. But that's not going to happen until the late 1800s. The name of the country is, I think I've actually got it identified there for you. Yeah. It's not Russia. It's Prussia. Write it down. Prussia. It's a northern German country, and they've got a pretty darn good military. In fact, they are scrappy, and they've got a good army, and so they're going to go toe-to-toe with France. with the help of the British. So there we got Britain and Prussia versus France. Well, if France has to fight against Britain and Prussia, look at the other two ones on the list. Do you see the other two listed there? Austria and Russia. France, what do you want? It's kind of like taking up sides in a sports game. Okay, Britain, I pick Prussia. Okay, you're on my team. Okay, who's France going to pick? Russia or Austria? Very good. Write that down. France picks Austria. Austria and Prussia, without going into all the details, have a bit of a rivalry going on there. So it actually kind of naturally makes sense that Prussia is going to be on the opposite side of Austria in that particular fight. So this is 7 Years' War. We got big armies fighting against each other for control of different parts of Europe. Are they fighting over religion? No. They're fighting over land. And it gets expensive because by the time we get to the 7 Years' War, we've started to see some development of science. We're going to spend more time on talking about science. We've started to see the militaries, employ firearms more so instead of like just, swords and bows and arrows and things like that. It's starting to get very expensive. Oh, wait, there's still one more country that hasn't joined in yet. Dibs on Russia. Who gets dibs on Russia? I'll see. Oh, that was fast. Russia starts out the war on France's side. But you're going to try. You're not going to give up on that. Write it down. At the beginning of the war, Russia takes France's side. France's and Austria's side. Okay? France's and Austria. Why? I don't know. Are there any really super solid reasons for the countries being at war with each other? Well, I'll tell you what. The war ends because of this. In part, it ends because of this. It ends after 7 years of fighting, and the countries eventually say, okay, that's enough fighting for right now. And they'll stop fighting. Is anyone going to lose the 7 Years' War? Does anyone lose the 7 Years' War? Actually, we've already identified. Who has lost something in the 7 Years' War? Who lost control of parts of India, control of parts of North America in the 7 Years' War? Very good. France lost that part. In the rest of Europe, it's going to be pretty much a stalemate. Write that down. It's pretty much a tie. Okay? There's not going to be big, huge shifts of land this way and that and other. You'll have a lot of dead people and a lot of expenses for fighting the war. Wars are expensive. I mean, you end up paying for them for a long time. But one of the interesting things that takes place, and it's one of those head scratchers, it's like, seriously? You're on this side? Have you given up on Russia being on your side? Perfect. Write that down. Who was your ally? Britain and Prussia are trying to get Russia to switch sides and join their side in the 7 Years' War. And guess what? It's going to work. And it happens when Russia gets a new leader. Russia is an autocracy. Russia has a Tsar. It's an imperial title. How do you get it? Your dad had it. Where did he get it from? His dad. Sometimes you'll have women in those positions. Although in Russia, too, they're like, men can do a lot better than women. Hold on to that thought. Is that what they're still believing in England? That women can't do the job? Yeah, they got proof from Elizabeth that she could do the job. Well, here we go. This guy right over here with sort of the blue, that is a guy by the name of Peter III. Okay? And he was named, we'll tell you a little bit more later on, he was named after Peter the Great. Now, Peter the Great was a great Russian leader. And so there were a lot of expectations that Peter III is going to be pretty darn good too, because he's got the name Peter. I mean, he was named after somebody who was very successful. Is he going to be successful? No, not really at all. In fact, he's going to be a bit of a disaster. He's not really equipped to be a great, powerful ruler. In fact, he's really not going to last very long as the ruler. But here's one thing he does do. Let's get right to this point. One thing he does do with respect to being in power, Peter III, he inherits power, and he inherits the 7 Years' War. The 7 Years' War is already going on while he is the new Tsar of Russia. And he's looking around going, Why am I on the side of France and Austria against these guys? And that's what you're saying. You're like, why are you on the side of France and Austria? You should be on our side. What's a good reason? Why should Peter the Third and Russia be on your side, Britain and Prussia? That's not a bad argument, I mean, as far as silly, stupid arguments go, because it rhymes, dude. It rhymes. Anybody come up with any other reasons? I mean, if you're in charge of a country, you got to make decisions and so forth. This is one of those head scratchers. See right here, this is actually the leader of Prussia, Frederick the Great. Do you like his hat? Do you like his hair? Do you like his outfit? Pretty dashing, huh? Isn't that pretty cool? Would you like to be friends with him? Who would like to be friends with him? You would? So would Peter. Write it down. Peter wants to be friends with Frederick the Great. What is in the way of their friendship? Peter the Third really likes the Prussian leader. What is in the way of their friendship? Oh, they're on opposite sides of the 7 Years' War. So Peter the Third of Russia switches sides for probably no better reason than he wants to be on the same team as Frederick the Great. He likes him. I mean, some people look at that, is this a bromance? I mean, what the heck is going on here? I mean, it's like, what? Is there any really good, solid reason for these countries to be fighting against each other? Well, when he switches, then people are like, okay, fine, maybe we should just wrap up this war because it's like, what the heck is going on here? Oh, by the way, we haven't introduced this woman right here. Catherine, that's his wife. She's from a German-speaking area. She was like arranged marriage. You're going to go off and live with Peter the Third. We'll touch upon Catherine later on. But I'll tell you what, you can make a little note of this. Peter the Third and his wife Catherine, they actually don't get along that well. He's not that into her. I mean, hello, she's the Tsarina. She married into the family. Yeah, she speaks German, but she's doing the best she can. In fact, he's so not into her, he sends her off into like a Russian Orthodox convent. That's not what you do with your wife. Actually, you know who helps her? Russian nobles have sized up Peter the Third as not being a very powerful, well-thought, solid thinker leader. They think he's going to be a wreck, and they want to get rid of him. And you know who they work with to get rid of him? Her. Her. She's not even Russian. She marries into the Russian royal family. Catherine. Instead of being packed off for the rest of her life to a Russian Orthodox convent, you know what she's going to be doing? Overthrowing her husband and having him killed. With the help of the nobles in Russia. And who are they going to put in power of the country? Take a guess. They're going to put Catherine in charge? Yeah, they are. And you know what she's going to be known by as history looks back on her rule as the Russian leader? Catherine the Great. She's going to be a tough son of a gun ruler for Russia. She marries into the throne. Her husband's not up for the job. The nobles get rid of her husband. She is working with them, and she's in charge from that point on. Very interesting. Yeah, and again, she didn't even she wasn't even born into the Russian royal family. Okay, so we'll keep our eyes on Catherine the Great. Very, very significant ruler there. Okay? Oh, by the way, just as a side note, Spain, Portugal, write that down. Spain and Portugal, by the late 1700s, they're not as important as they had been like even 200 years before. Because when we double back around and we talk about how Europe explores and establishes colonies in different parts of the world, Spain and Portugal are a big deal. But their day in the sun, their great days and so forth are going to be numbered. And eventually they will decline. And they're not going to matter as much. In fact, poor old Spain, they're going to lose all of their colonies, almost all of their colonies in the early 1800s. And then they're going to lose the rest of them, boom, boom, against the United States at the end of the 1800s. But that's the scoop, okay? Who wins the 7 Years' War? Britain, did you win the 7 Years' War? Yes. Where? India. Did you lose the 7 Years' War entirely, France? No. Where did you at least fight it to a tie? In Europe. Very good. All right, very good. Okay. Science. Big shift of gears here now. This is on the top of page 3 in the handout. Excuse me, at the bottom, near the bottom of page 2 in the handout. The scientific revolution. You guys ready for some scientific revolution? Okay. This is going to be a significant thing, and we're talking about it in the history of Europe. We're talking about all these different political things and so forth going on in Europe, but in some respects, this stuff having to do with science is going to be even more important. But like, what can you do with science? If you have a lot of science, are you guys interested in like pursuing a career in science? Yes. Doing what? Kind of want to be a doctor. Do they have pretty good like medical, educational facilities and so forth in the United States? Yeah, it's a pretty good place to do that. Anybody want to go into like engineering or something like that? Are there good engineering schools in this country? Yeah. Where in history are like the first major scientific discoveries made? I mean, if you go back to ancient history and so forth, who was doing the major scientific advances? China or, I don't know, the Germanic tribes running around pillaging in Europe? How many guys would, yeah, China, right? Printing they invented, compass, I mean, they do all kinds of stuff, right? Put that down. Other places in the world had earlier advances in science. But you know what? During this time period, Europe's going to catch up. And Europe is going to start moving past. So what? So what if you have a better understanding about how science works? What difference could that make in a power struggle in the world? What difference could that make? What difference could it make if you know more science than some other country in some other part of the world? So what if you're technologically advanced? How can that help you in a war? Oh, that's a good point. Write that down. Because if you have better science in your country, you are going to be able to potentially use those for military applications to build better weapons. Okay? Sometimes if there's time, and I'll look and see if actually I can get that on YouTube. There's a documentary film I like to use in here. It's called Gun, Germs, and Steel, and it helps explain why it is that Europeans, when they go over to the Americas, are able to conquer the people in the Americas. And literally, sometimes when the number of Europeans is just maybe a couple of hundred, and the number of Americans, Native Americans, is thousands and thousands and thousands. And one of the answers is, who's got the guns? Who had the science and technology to develop the guns? Europe. Who had the science and technology to develop really good steel weapons like swords? Europe. Oh, and then there's the other one, germs. Where have they had more exposure to diseases from people interacting with one another and farm animals in Europe or the Americas? This is weird. It's kind of like, is it a good thing? Right now, you guys, is it a good thing if a lot of people ultimately have some exposure to and then ultimately build up antibodies and resistance to things like COVID? Is that a good thing? Yeah, I mean, and sometimes, and hopefully, not too long from now, you guys can get that antibody by getting the vaccination. That's kind of the easier way of doing it than getting the full-on disease. I mean, you guys would prefer to have the vaccine as opposed to having a full, nasty case of COVID. Yeah, I think I'd probably like that too. But here's the deal. Europeans develop a lot of resistance and so forth to disease because of so much interaction with it. I mean, like the plague. How many of you guys died from the plague, the Black Death? Didn't some of you guys? You did? How many like your second generation did? Was it you guys? Wasn't it? This is the class that you guys were like pretty much oblivious to it, because all the girls traded with each other and spread the disease, and you're all like going, "You suck," and die. But you guys were the ones that survived. Well, if you have a lot of interaction in Europe, eventually you will build over generations a lot of immunities to diseases like that. Well, guess how much immunity to diseases, European diseases, people in the Americas have? Zip. What percentage of the population in Europe died from the Black Death? Remember? About what? About a third? Yeah. Give or take. Do you know how many Americans are going to die as a result of the European diseases that come over? It's going to be like 95%. It's going to be huge. So let's get into this. I mean, let's focus on the kind of the technology part of it first. I mean, some of those other things are going to be, just dumb luck and have to do with farm animals more than anything. The scientific revolution is going to take off in Europe. It's going to be very interesting. It's going to have a lot of different impacts. And it starts taking place during this time period we're looking at. Okay? And it's going to be a difficult start. It's mostly going to start in astronomy. Write that down. In the scientific field of astronomy. We'll get to like medical science later on and other kinds of sciences, but it's going to start in astronomy. Okay? And this is one where, and it builds up very slowly. Because, I don't know, when was the great period in Europe? And everyone looks back and says, wow, that was when all the really smart people were, and they were amazing, and they did great philosophy, and they did great science. When was that? When was that time period that the people during the Renaissance looked back and said, man, Europeans were smart back then? When was it? Or where was it? Where is Athens? In Greece. And where is Rome? In Italy, yeah, but anyway. So the ancient Greek and Roman time periods, they look back and they're like, oh, well, those guys knew everything. And in fact, there were Greek scientists and so forth that said, hey, you know what? The planet is really cool that we live on, and that sun thing over there, and the sun goes around the earth. Go ahead, write that down. What do you call that when people believe that the sun goes around the earth? Is that true? Are you telling me? Because in the morning, I see the sun, and I'm like, if I stood there long enough, I go, look, it's rising. The sun is moving. And it continues to move in the sky until it sets in the west. And then I don't know where it goes. But then it comes back out on the other side. The sun moves, right? Right? Isn't that right? That's the observation, right? I mean, because if we're moving, then I would feel it, right? If I was on something that were moving, I would feel it. I don't know what I'm talking about, do I? Smart people start to actually look and make observations, and they have to be careful, because, write this down, it's not just an old Greek idea that the sun moves around the earth. It's a church-approved idea, a Catholic church-approved idea. Write that down. A Catholic church-approved idea. And if the Catholic Church says this is the way things are, then you would be in potential danger if you started saying things otherwise. Like Nicholas Copernicus. Nicholas Copernicus is an astronomer. He's from Poland. And this is look at the dates for Nicholas Copernicus. He's around 1473 to 1543. So in his lifetime will be the beginning of the Protestant Reformation. Okay, so the Catholic Church is still very powerful, but he makes observations. Nicholas Copernicus, he looks up and he observes and he's like, I have observed, and I'm sorry, write it down. The earth goes around the sun. Oh, and by the way, the moon goes around the earth, but the earth goes around the sun. On the other planets, they go around the sun too. What goes around the earth? One thing. The moon. That's what his conclusion was. And he's communicating with other astronomers in Latin and so forth, but he's afraid to publish his conclusion. When is his conclusion that the earth goes around the sun going to be published? when he dead. Because could he be punished by the Catholic Church if that came out after he's dead? No, he can't. We'll continue on with the ideas of Copernicus and the other astronomers and the scientific revolution next time. You guys have an awesome weekend. Yeah, we'll get to Kepler and Galilei. Yeah. Okay.